So, continuing to talk about Norman Fisher's book on Lojong, Training in Compassion. I wanted to first kind of clarify something from yesterday. It's come up today. Yesterday we were talking about, going towards our difficulties, leaning in, embracing our difficulties, our conflicts, our suffering. And I talked about, embrace kind of being like a hug, to hug our difficulties, to really go in without trying to get rid of them. And I just wanted to be extra super clear that this hug is not a gentle, soothing hug. This hug, right, embracing. If I'm really angry, if I'm really triggered, if I'm really jealous, then that hug is a jealous hug. It's an angry hug. It's a stressed out hug. It's not a loving, gentle hug to make it feel better. It's really embracing, right? That was kind of the point of yesterday's talk, was that we don't approach suffering with the intention to end it. That's why we have the koan, delusion is enlightenment. Enlightenment is delusion. That's why Zenju Roshi or Sensei, I don't know, is she Roshi? Roshi? Osho? Zenju Osho. That's why she talks so much about the shadow and the darkness. So many koans about this. Enlightenment is delusion. Delusion is enlightenment. How do you go straight down a path with 99 curves? All of these teachings pointing us to really embracing anger means anger. How do we penetrate and liberate ourselves from anger? Become one with anger. And of course, there's all these techniques to like satiate and mitigate our anger, count to 10, self-compassion, give yourself grace. And these are all very powerful practices, and they're great because when we're at work, when we're dealing with family, when we're cooking a meal together, we have to get along. And we can't just be expressing anger and jealousy at each other all the time. So it's good to have those tools. But when we decide to take the bodhisattva path, the path of awakening, we have this very safe container of zazen, sesshin, stillness, in solidarity with each other, where we have the opportunity to just be angry, to look at our anger, our sadness, our grief, our jealousy, our greed, our remorse, our regret. Really look at them. Not give them a nice hug so they go away. Be grieving. Be grieving so hard that eventually it shifts without us trying to. That's the tricky part. Don't try to make it go away and it'll go away. I don't know, that might be a reductionist way of seeing it. Go ahead and rinse those words from your brain hole. That's just kind of how it shows up for me sometimes. But yeah, that's why sesshin is so important. That's why sangha is so important, because we're all here together, supporting each other and going in, really being with what is. You know, if I'm in sesshin with someone and they're giving me the stink eye and they're clearly angry, I feel so grateful. I feel so inspired that they're going there, that they're allowing themselves to do that, and that they trust me. They trust me to hold this space with them, to do that, to really investigate, what is this anger? What is this sadness? Where is it coming from? Whose is it? All of these koans that we work with. And the only way to really investigate it is to really be it. It's the only way to really penetrate it. So I'll just talk really quickly today about just this one little sentence. We're still in the introduction for those who are joining us today. Norman Fisher's Training in Compassion, Zen Commentary on the Practice of Lojong, which is training compassion. So he says, compassion literally means embracing the suffering of others. I don't think that is what it literally means, because later he says compassion literally means, and he says something else. Anyway, it's fine. Sorry. Sorry, Norman. We love your book so much. To embrace the suffering of others is to be liberated and opened by that suffering to the point of finding love. To embrace the suffering of others is to be liberated and opened by that suffering. So when you're sitting sesshin, really breathing with the universe, do you feel the suffering of the universe? Can you open up to everyone's experience? And why is that liberating? It's liberating because, at least in my experience, when I really do breathe with the universe, I feel everyone's suffering as my own. It reminds me of that koan that I talk about all the time. Comes up so much, and I'm sorry if it's redundant, but it really is my favorite. And towards the end of the koan, it says, beneath the shadowless tree, the communal ferry boat. This communal ferry boat. We're all riding this leaky ass ship together, whether we know it or not. We're on the ship with Israel. We're on the ship with Hamas. We're on the ship with Trump. We're on the ship with Biden and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Sorry. And to really feel that, we are sharing this boat. And the shadowless tree is no separation, no self, no tree. The only way to have a shadow is if there's a thing with another thing casting a thing on another thing. So what a beautiful way to express oneness. Shadowless tree. And what does a tree do? It gives oxygen, gives food and shelter to animals and sometimes hippie humans. So yeah, in this reality of oneness, no separation, no I, no you. No I, no you. That shit's real. That shit's so real. We really see that we're all on this boat together. And so this liberation he's talking about is to be liberated from the shackles of self. Hmm. Shackles of what I need, of how it should be. And of course, we have to honor our needs and we have to honor our karma and we have to be true to ourselves and be authentic. And we have to see that that's all delusion. Both are important. To really know ourselves and our needs and our patterns and to take care of ourselves is the way that we're able to see that all of that is empty. We have to do both. And so, yeah, it kind of works both ways, right? One way, we practice zazen, we work with a teacher, and we wake up to the fact that the tree has no shadow, and thus we see that we're all on the boat together. And in the opposite way, like Norman is saying, we embrace the suffering of others, we open up to see and really feel in our bones that your suffering is my suffering. We feel that communal ferry boat. And thus, we see that the tree has no shadow. Does that make sense? How it kind of goes both ways? No. I guess not. That's high. So to embrace the suffering of others, to see that we're all in this together. Your suffering is my suffering, is to be liberated and opened by that suffering to the point of finding love. Selfless love. That is so hard to feel. I don't know. I'm sure some of you have an easier time feeling that than I do. But man, what a beautiful thing. And then he says, compassion is impossible if we can't learn to bear our own sufferings and difficulties. If our old habit of denying and running away continues to have its way with us. Yeah, so I think this goes deeper than just you have to love yourself before you can love anyone else. You have to take care of yourself before you can take care of anyone else. You have to put your mask on before you put the mask, your kid's mask on. I think that's true to a certain extent, but I think it goes a little bit deeper than that, which is the same point that we've been saying. Um, we have to see that they're not separate. Taking care of my suffering is taking care of the suffering of the whole universe. And similarly, taking care of your suffering authentically, without thought, without a sense of like, I am helping you now. No, just simply help the person across the street. To selflessly help others is to help myself. So we have to take care of ourselves in order to take care of others by definition of oneness. And that reminds me of this other koan, which I don't know if I'll remember, but it's in the Gateless Gate, Muman Khan. And this guy comes to the teacher and he says, teacher, I'm just paraphrasing here because I don't have the book on me. He says, teacher, please help me. I'm in my hour of despair. God, what does he say? So good. show me the way. Basically, he's in his darkest hour, the dark night of the soul. He's tried everything and he's just suffering. So he says, please, he says, give me alms. That's what he says. He says, please, teacher, I'm suffering so much. Please give me alms. And the teacher says, um, he says his name. I forget what his name is. Let's say his name is Tom. So the teacher says, Tom. And Tom says, yes. And the teacher says, you have already drunk the finest wine in all of China, but you don't know it yet, or something like that. Or you've already drunk the finest wine in all of China, and still you go on like this, or something like that. Which sounds a little dismissive and a little bit insensitive. But, and working with this koan, we see it a little bit differently, but I think it fits perfectly just for the purposes of this talk and for pointing at what Norman Fisher is talking about here. That just your pain is it. The fact that you feel this dark night of the soul is the finest wine in the world. That's what it is. You've already drunk the finest wine of all of China, but you say that you have not even wet your lips. That's what it is. I know it's so hard, and as a person on all of the privileged sides of the intersectionality chart, it feels really difficult to say it, but I really do believe for everyone, no matter your identity, no matter where you come from, no matter what your situation and background is, to feel the dark night of the soul, I think is actually a gift. To be in touch with our suffering is not easy, and it's not common. Sure, everybody suffers, but to really be in touch with it, to not just take refuge in my family or take refuge in baseball games or take refuge in the clubs that I'm in or, doing local politics or, all these different ways that we can kind of escape and focus on the external world. To really have that experience of deep suffering, feeling the suffering of others, right? That's what drives most of us to practice, or a lot of us, including the Buddha. The Buddha knew suffering, but then he saw the suffering of others, and he was like, what the fuck? And he had this dark night of the soul. And I heard this teacher, this Zen teacher in Ohio recently say, to what extent is your pain your medicine itself? And when I think of healing, like I got a really bad splinter yesterday and it's been healing, and the healing process hurts. How much is pain just simply a part of healing? And now the lines between pain and healing, pain and awakening, suffering and enlightenment, they really start to blur. And that's another koan where Uman says, medicine and disease quell each other. So I think Sesshin allows us this space where we're supporting each other. We're allowing each other to experience this golden liquid of pain and joy and immense opening and peace and bliss and all of it for sure. But we're just really talking about pain right now because that's kind of what Norman is focusing on in this book. How do we transform our difficulty into compassion? So, yeah, if you're having a really blissful session, that's great too. Um, and really go into that. What is that? Is that my joy? Or is that the communal ferry boat's joy? Whose joy is that? And how do I feel compassion for others when I'm just drowning in joy? That was really interesting. I have a psychology or like a social psychology PhD cousin, and he told me once about this study where they found that most people, if not like almost all people, um, will give money to someone on the streets when they're having a really hard time, and they won't give when like everything's going really well in their life. I think that's what it was. Um, so yeah, in our deepest joy, we don't want to get stuck on that either. So can we be liberated by feeling the sufferings of the world through everything? A tall order, but thank you all for doing this practice, being liberated by opening up to our suffering and the suffering of others. And let's support each other, really support each other in this really, really difficult work.